Good afternoon and welcome to the ROQUEFORT Therapeutics PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time by the Q&A tab situated in the right-hand corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll. And I'd now like to hand you over to Stephen West, Executive Chairman. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on our company update presentation. My name is Steve West. I'm the founder and chairman of ROQUEFORT Therapeutics, which is a material biotech company focused on the oncology space. I'm joined here today by our CEO, Adjan Reginald, who's going to lead the presentation today and go through our growth plans. So without much further ado, I'll pass the presentation over to Adjan. Thanks, Adjan.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, everybody. So as Steve mentioned, this is an update presentation. So we're going to take you through a quick reminder of the company. So we'll start off with a snapshot. ROQUEFORT was established in 2020 by Steve and the other founders. And in 2021, they acquired Lyramid, which is an exciting portfolio of therapeutics, which included the antibody Midkind therapeutics, but also an oligotherapeutic for Midkind. And then in September of last year, ROQUEFORT acquired Oncogene, which added two more families of innovative cancer medicines. One was the cell therapy and the second was an RNA therapeutics. So while the company's had a couple of different acquisitions, both of those have been focused in this highly interesting and highly valuable market niche of next generation or highly innovative new cancer medicines. And the focus of the company remains there, that we're focusing on making medicines that can help patients that have currently very few options. The portfolio is a preclinical portfolio. So what that means is that all four programs have not reached clinical trials yet in humans. And that's important because that's a significant milestone. It's a significant milestone, of course, because we're getting closer to being able to help people, but it's also a significant inflection point in the valuation, typically, of cancer companies. And the average valuation for a cancer medicines company that's in the preclinical stage of development is around $70 million or 55 million pounds. And that's based on data, which is pretty long and large data set. That's going back to 2005 till 2020. So with our four programs, one is an antibody program against our historical target, which is Midkind. The second program is an RNA therapeutic, again, versus Midkind. The third program is a cell therapy where we're looking to enhance the body's own immune system. And then another RNA therapeutic looking at a different target. This one is STAT6. So all four of those programs have the potential to make it into the clinic. We're developing all four of those programs. And we are looking to reach that preclinical milestone by the end of the year with at least one of those programs. The reason we're confident that we can reach that milestone is because the leadership team has a track record of doing exactly that, taking preclinical compounds or even actually ideas. You know, in our previous history, many of us have taken a drug from just a good idea to actually into clinical trials, winning regulatory approvals in the US, in Europe, in the UK, manufacturing those medicines, but critically taking them to that big value driver, which is getting them ready for clinical trials. This is a very highly innovative company. A number of the programs were invented by Professor Sir Martin Evans, who won the Nobel Prize in 2007. And we have our own state-of-the-art laboratory in Stratford-upon-Avon, and we have access to a manufacturing facility as well. So ROQUEFORT is not a virtual company. It's a company with real infrastructure, with a leadership team that has a track record of doing exactly this, taking very early prospects and driving them and develop them to the value inflection point of being able to go into the clinic. And we're able to do that in our own facilities as well as with a network of leading cancer institutes around the world. So we see significant value potential. And as I mentioned, the average valuation for a preclinical company in this stage of development is around £55 million. Our licensing strategy is a way that we realize some of this value. So we focus on developing new medicines, and we create valuation milestones by completing experiments along the way, but also then by creating licensing deals where, in the ecosystem that we work in, small companies like ours typically license to large pharma companies. And as I mentioned, these licensing deals add to the value of the company, but also validate our technology. And so that's a snapshot of who we are and our strategy and how we execute our strategy. As I mentioned, our leadership team has a depth of experience. So Steve has over 25 years experience in public companies, in finance, and has a proven track record of growing companies. Professor Sir Martin Evans, as I mentioned, is a Nobel laureate and a very eminent scientist, again, who's been working for more than 20 years in developing medicines, as well as being an eminent scientist in this field for more than 50 years. Professor Armin Keating, who's our chief medical advisor, is a physician, MD, PhD, based in Canada, who was president of the American Society of Hematology. Armin has developed a number of medicines that have gone from being just very early innovation to actually getting into the clinic and completing later stage clinical trials, and is very well known in the biotech field, both in small companies and in large companies. Similarly, one of our non-executive directors, Dr. Darren Disley, was CEO of Horizon Discovery for more than 10 years, and he was able to drive that company's increase in valuation from seed funding through an IPO at over 100 million to actually valuations in excess of 500 million. And again, Darren has an impeccable academic background as well from the University of Cambridge. Dr. Michael Stein is another MD, PhD, who has a very strong track record in biotech and is based in Oxford. Simon Sinclair, again, is highly qualified with an MD and a PhD, based in Cambridge, and is a chief safety officer for Rickett. Jean de Val is a very eminent patent attorney, has a deep understanding of intellectual property, but is also a biotech CEO and brings to the board, again, more experience in early innovation, but in particular also how you manage the critical piece of intellectual property. This slide talks a little bit about where we've progressed as a group since the acquisition of Oncogenie in 2022. So to remind you, in September 2022, ROQUEFORT acquired Oncogenie, increased our portfolio from MidKind to including also the cell therapy and the siRNA for STAT6. So that full portfolio we've only had for less than 6 months now. So in Q4, what we did was we integrated Oncogenie, and we also did a portfolio review to figure out what we needed to do with each of these programs to drive value and to create the most attractive programs potentially for licensing, but also potentially for us to take into the clinic ourselves at the end of this year. Following that strategic process, we then started three things in parallel. We started looking at out-licensing partners. We developed our R&D programs, but we also kicked off our internal R&D. So R&D at ROQUEFORT is both internal, based on our own laboratories, and external, using a network of leading cancer research institutes, which you see here. So the Olivia Newton-John Institute, the Lowry Cancer Institute, the Hawkins Laboratory, Sydney University, and as we mentioned, the Keating Lab in Toronto. So our R&D programs have been going since Q4. We've already announced significant progress with a couple of these different programs. And as we reach key milestones, like being able to show efficacy in animal models and in vitro models, we'll announce that data. Our laboratory here in Stratford-upon-Avon is already up and running. We have people working there, and that is focused on delivery systems. So often with new medicines, you need to also figure out how to deliver those medicines to the cancer. So how do you get them safely into a human, and how do you get them to the cancer so that you can actually kill the cancer? And so that's the piece of research that we're doing, or that piece of drug development, I suppose, more than research, that we're doing here in Stratford-upon-Avon. And then finally, in parallel, we started in October to look at potential out-licensing partners. So who are the best partners for us to consider in terms of taking forward our core programs, so our 4 core cancer programs, but also who are the partners that we need to increase the likelihood of those programs helping patients. And in the modern world of cancer therapy, one of the key additions that you need is diagnostics. So we need to be able to diagnose the patients that will benefit from our medicines accurately and in a way that fits into the existing treatment paradigm. And as we announced last week, we were very happy to form a partnership with Randox, which is one of the leading diagnostic companies, and certainly the leading diagnostic company in the UK. So I'll talk a little bit about that license. So it's an exclusive worldwide license, excluding the territory of Japan, and we have, we would like to find a partner for Japan as well. It's for 10 years, and it utilizes our MidKine antibody technology. So this is a technology that we've already demonstrated has the ability to bind very accurately with cancers that express MidKine. We're using that antibody to kill cancer, and here Randox are using that antibody to be the active component of a medical diagnostic. So it's very synergistic. This is a very complementary move for us to find a world-leading diagnostic company to develop medical diagnostics to identify patients that have MidKine cancers, and then for us to come along and to be able to help those patients by killing the cancers using the antibodies. We estimate that the total transaction value will be in excess of £5 million, and it includes collaborative research programs where we're able to identify new cancer medicines and diagnostics. The key strategic value of this partnership is fourfold. First of all, it helps us to remain focused on developing medicines because we have a great partner to help us develop these companion diagnostics. This really validates MidKine as a target because a company like Randox is willing to commit to identifying patients that have cancers that express MidKine. Companion diagnostics like this statistically vastly increase the likelihood of clinical trials and therefore this drug getting to market. It doubles the likelihood of that happening. And then lastly, by being able to diagnose patients early, we're able to accelerate our clinical trials and dramatically reduce the time and cost of clinical trials. The MidKine antibodies are progressing well. We're targeting metastatic cancer, so that's cancer that is the most lethal because it's spread. And what we've been able to demonstrate in breast cancer and in lung metastases is that the antibody so far has shown good safety. The reason we've picked these 2 indications is because even now, after many decades of developing new cancer medicines, the mortality rate is still very high with these cancers. So up to 70% of patients, unfortunately, have died after 5 years. And the data shows that the prevalence, so how many of these cancers express MidKine, is very, very high. So what we're looking to do is to help patients, again, who are not getting the best from existing therapies. So by targeting these patients that still have a very high mortality, even with all the advancements in modern medicine, we're hoping that our MidKine therapeutics, in this case the MidKine antibody program, can improve that life expectancy. And hopefully you can see how the diagnostic from Randox is going to help us, because this will help us identify these patients quickly, which means we can treat them more quickly. And nearly always, if we can treat patients with aggressive metastatic cancer more quickly, we can improve their prognosis. This good safety profile is commercially very attractive. One of the things that is always a risk with a new medicine, an innovative new medicine, is that it's a double-edged sword, that you get some side effects as a consequence of having a very good cancer response. Here, we've been able to establish a good safety profile early, and that's perhaps increased the attractiveness of our antibody programs. The next step for these programs is that we'll move into in vivo clinical studies to demonstrate that the antibody kills cancer in cancer cells. And then we'll move into toxicology studies. That's it, toxicology studies, before we look at filing an IND. So this is a view of where we are in terms of our overall pathway. So you'll see at the top there that our antibody programs are progressing well, and are progressing into in vivo efficacy and toxicology. The oligo program is about 1 quarter behind. The STAT6 program is moving into efficacy next quarter, and the cell therapies are also moving into efficacy next quarter. So, as I mentioned, a very innovative portfolio, 4 products, which is a lot for a small company, and particularly a small company of our very small market cap. And again, as a reminder, typically a company with a single product, which is in late preclinical development, would have a much, much higher value to potential acquirers. So in summary, with the 4 programs, ROQUEFORT Therapeutics is very much a material biotech company focused on this next generation of innovative cancer medicines. It's extremely well positioned with 4 fully funded preclinical drug development programs. We've partnered with leading academic centers, as we've shown you, which complement our own in-house expertise and our laboratory infrastructure. We spent Q4 really making sure that our strategy was the best fit for our purpose, and establishing the foundations, bringing in the key people in R&D, and then now we're focused very much on delivering commercial milestones in Q1 and Q2. In Q1, we've already delivered experimental results for the MidKine program and commercial results in terms of this licensing deal that we signed with Randox. We're still very much on track to file an IND by the end of the year, and in parallel working on licensing opportunities, because frankly we're getting a lot of interest for our programs. So by attending conferences, by attending meetings, we're meeting a lot of big pharma companies who are your typical partners in the future, and through that we're our programs, because we're delivering the results that we've talked about, are gaining a lot of attention. So that's a summary. If I could pass you back to Steve now, before we jump into Q&A.
Thanks, Ajahn. I hope everyone followed that. I mean, I think Ajahn distills our story very well. There's obviously further details on our website, which is in the process of being updated. So we'll have a brand new website live next week. So please reference that as well. And please continue to submit questions as we go through the Q&A now. I might dive into the first question, actually, Ajahn.
Sure, please.
That's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we've got a submitted question here. Congratulations on the licensing deal. Can you please tell me whether this may help in preventing an early and unwanted takeover bid for ROQUEFORT by an outside party? Well, firstly, thanks for the congratulations. We're certainly very happy with the licensing deal. It's one of many that we're looking at doing. In terms of a takeover bid, that in itself doesn't protect us, but we are very sensitive to anything to do with a takeover, mainly because of our low market cap, and we think there's a lot of value to come yet before we should entertain any type of takeover bid. So we are very well protected because of our share capital structure. We've got less than 50% of our shares in free float, so it's almost impossible for someone to do a hostile takeover bid of us. So we're very much protected. on that. We have another question. Should I just keep running through these, Ajahn?
Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead.
And I might throw them over to you when I get stuck. Next question is: do you have any plans to address the current depressed share price? The company last raised money at 14p, and we're currently well below those levels. Very good question. I think we are unfortunately in an environment where biotech stocks generally are depressed. So we're suffering a bit of a depressed share price from that. But I think in terms of our peers in the market, I think we've managed to maintain our share price quite well. That said, we do see our current value as being undervalued, and we think there's a lot of value to come. And we think as the markets improve, you'll see that translate into an improved share price. And as we deliver on our milestones, which Ajahn outlined in this presentation as well, it should certainly see some see-through value here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, just to reiterate that, biotech is significantly depressed, as normally happens as risk, as sort of global risk and macroeconomics drives. Biotech is one of the things that is counter-cyclical to that. We have performed better than our peers in the UK, and as Steve said, we're focused on delivering the true milestones. The fundamentals. The milestones are really what drive value here. As we deliver those critical data-driven milestones, the value of the company will increase, and we'd hope the share price to follow that.
Thanks, Ajahn. I think the next one's for you, Ajahn. What are the next major milestones for the company?
Yeah, as we've talked about before, on the, let me just go back the slide I squiggled over. For each of these programs, what we're looking to do is to deliver those tangible results that potential partners, big pharma partners, are looking for, which is in vivo efficacy and then toxicology. We've already reported back that the mid-kind antibody programs have shown good safety in that first study. We're doing the same. We will do the same with each of those other programs. So readouts are not months away. They're typically weeks away, and we'll have a number of readouts. So I think it is really important for people perhaps to see this is not a company where we only get news every 3 months. There is news because there is material movement in how we develop these drugs every few weeks. And as Steve said, we've got a lot of interest because we're delivering against those milestones on schedule and on budget.
Thanks, Ajahn. Next question is, does the company have any intention on listing on the NASDAQ? Again, a good question. You do see a lot of biotech companies listing on the NASDAQ. I think for us, we are certainly too small to be considering anything along those lines at the moment. However, if we deliver as we plan, then I'd hope we'd have a material market cap, certainly by the end of the year, where we can maybe consider listing on the NASDAQ, but it'd have to be for the right reasons. And I think those main reasons are there's a whole new set of investors over in the US with very deep pockets. So it would be the next step in our growth plans, I think, if we did consider to do that.
Yep, I think that's right. I think NASDAQ is the main market for biotech. There are hundreds of large institutional funds in NASDAQ, but you need to have we'd need to have grown and completed the first phase of our evolution for that to be sensible and in the best interest of all shareholders. But of course, if that's appropriate, I think we'd consider it, Steve.
Yeah. Next question is, does the board plan on introducing institutional investors to the company? Absolutely, yes, we do plan on doing that. I guess we are a little bit constrained at the moment due to our current market cap. Most of these institutions are limited on what percentage they can hold in any company and they also have a minimum investment size as well. So we are certainly socializing with institutional investors and others that represent institutional investors. So as we grow, we would certainly expect these institutions to join us on the ride, and yeah, we'll certainly notify the market as and when that happens. Next question. This may be for you, Ajahn. Who are your most like-for-like competitors, and what are their valuations in comparison to ROQUEFORT?
So you've kept the tricky ones for me, Steve. Okay.
That's right.
It's a tough one. There aren't really any like-for-like comparators in the UK, and I say that in all humility, because of the breadth and depth of our portfolio. You know, we own the rights, or we own the 4 families of products. Those families of products have multiple drugs within them, and all 4 are in novel targets or in novel modalities. So we're fairly unusual. There are some NASDAQ companies which would be similar comparisons, and I think we've told you what the valuation comparison is. You know, so as a whole, across all listed companies, and particularly companies that were acquired between 2005 and 2020, the average valuation for a preclinical oncology company was £55 million, or about $70 million.
Thanks, Ajahn. Next question. Is the company only seeking licensing deals, or is it possible for the company to be sold to a big pharma? Again, probably one for you, Ajahn.
Yeah, so why don't I start that, Steve, and then just let me know what you think as well. So, you know, licensing deals are the most common. You know, as many of you know, this is my background. I was a business development director at Roche Pharmaceuticals, did a number of licensing deals, and then also did a number of acquisitions. You know, it's often happens, and it happened to me in my previous job, that licensing deals become acquisitions. As a big pharma company, you look at biotech companies based on the products that they have. So you look at their technology, you look at their innovation, and you look at licensing in the first instance, typically. You know, as Steve said, we're well positioned to avoid a hostile takeover. So I think Steve and myself and the board are committed to maximizing value for shareholders. So, you know, we look at licensing deals because they are a very sensible way for us to add value to the company, but also for us to, you know, fulfill our purpose, which is also, you know, which is also critical. We want to be able to bring these medicines to market, to patients, so we can help these patients that have very few other options. And licensing deals are a way for us to bring partners in. As I mentioned, licensing deals also are a way that big pharma companies learn a lot about individual programs, and a percentage of those licensing deals become acquisition offers.
Yeah, thanks, Ajahn. I guess the only thing I would add to that is, because we've got 4 unique drug programs, all complementary but all unique, we have a lot of flexibility on whether we do licensing deals, whether we take the drug programs forward ourselves, whether we sell the subsidiary company that owns that drug program. So we have a lot of options, I guess, on success. So we're well placed for that.
I think the next one is, well, it could be either of us actually, but I suspect
this is for you, Ajahn. Yeah.
So the question is it true that one of your previous companies you sold for 100 times return? So what is true is that investors were able to sell their shares for 100 times return. So some of my early investors in the previous company had bought shares for £1 and were able to sell the shares for £101 about 4.5 years later. So yes, that is true. It's a matter of public record.
Next question is, can you share some potential milestones in which you envisage the £5 million to be paid from Randox? Unfortunately, we're constrained by confidentiality on specifics, but what I can say is that there's a component which is upfront, and there's a component which is royalties on sales. And unfortunately, I'm kind of restricted in giving any further details on that. But we're very happy with the deal that we managed to negotiate there.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't say anything more, but as some of you know, during the pandemic, I worked at a large diagnostic company for a couple of years. So I think Steve's point is a good one. We're very happy for this deal in diagnostics. It works well for both parties, and we're very happy to have a good partner that will help us develop these companion diagnostics that are so critical to our drug programs.
Yeah. Next question is, can you speak about A, cash reserves, excuse me, B, cash burn rate, and C, future financing plans? I can touch upon it. I'm unfortunately restricted, but in terms of cash reserves, the last number we published is quite old. So that was when we published our June 30 numbers in the second half of last year. Now, cash number back then was just over 3 million, 3.2 million pounds, I believe. We haven't published a new cash number yet, so I'm restricted on what I can say, but I can say that we're publishing our 2022 numbers next month, so we can update the market on cash reserves then. I can add some colour though. So you'll see in our literature that we always refer to our drug programs being fully funded. So we are fully funded for our drug programs. We don't have any plans to go to market and raise money at the moment. So hopefully that answers the question in a roundabout way. Next question is, what would you say would be the key KPIs to measure your progress? It's a very good question. I think for us, it's all about delivering results, which Ajahn talked about earlier. And I think those main results that we can demonstrate to the market are the first one is the results of our R&D programs on all the 4 programs that we're running. And that'll come through as safety data, which we've already published on one of the programs. It will come through as efficacy data as well. It'll also be in terms of licensing deals, and I think that's the real sort of the real moment for the market, where you're going to see numbers published around licensing deals. And I think you will see the disparity between, at that point in time, the disparity between what our current market cap is and what the potential deal sizes are. Don't know if you had anything to add to that, Jane?
No, I think it's a really good summary. I think, as I said, if you look at the data, you can see the normal valuation, or the normal, either public valuation or private valuation of preclinical oncology companies, and the size of licensing deals is relative to that, not relative to our current market cap. That's what we'd be looking for.
And we have a final question, which is, what is Roquefort's USP, as many companies are researching antibodies? That's probably better explained by you, Ajahn.
Yeah, so I think this is a good question and a good point. Many companies looking at antibodies. Again, in my previous work, I'd worked at one of the leading companies developing antibodies, and did licensing deal for antibodies. The key with our antibodies is threefold. First of all, they are entirely novel antibodies, so we have a very strong intellectual property position. The second thing is they're quite a large family of antibodies. There's 4 different antibodies. And the reason that's relevant is the third point, which is they're targeting a novel target. So MidKine is a novel target. So there are lots of companies that have good antibody technology, but the antibody is the tool, the target where you aim your antibody, or what your antibody's effect on cancer is really the measure of your value and your USP. So where we're still fairly unique is where we certainly hold the biggest portfolio of intellectual property around MidKine, and in particular our MidKine antibodies have shown great precision and great efficacy so far in preclinical studies against killing cancer. So that's really our USP, that we're able to focus these MidKine antibodies on killing the hardest to treat cancers. And we're able to demonstrate that with the data that we're producing.
Ajahn, Stephen, thank you very much for that. I think you've actually addressed all those questions from investors. And of course, the company will review all the questions submitted today and will publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. But just before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to the company, Ajahn, could I just ask you for a few closing comments?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, ROQUEFORT is a material biotech company with a significant portfolio of 4 fully funded programs. We've been able to demonstrate already in Q1 that we can both deliver the critical milestones that show that we're able to progress those programs, and also the commercial licenses that begin to crystallize the value that we're creating within the company. A near-term IND and licensing opportunities are what we're working on, and we believe this is the first of many deals that we're looking to complete. Thank you.
Ajahn, Stephen, thanks once again for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close the session, as you'll now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of ROQUEFORT Therapeutics PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation, and good afternoon to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.